Hi, everyone. We're going to get started. Welcome to today's competitive grant proposal writing workshop. This class is sponsored by Valley Vision, and it's really focused on equipping participants who are submitting to the We Prosper Together Catalyst Region Pre-Development RFP. So we will be specifically talking about and referencing that RFP, but all of the tools and best practices that we cover are also applicable more broadly. And so hopefully we can give you some tools that will be useful for other funding scenarios also. I do want to mention that while I hope that this will help you to submit a really killer RFP, coming to this class, of course, does not guarantee funding. And then for anyone who has just joined, we are recording this session and it will be posted to the Valley Vision website afterwards. All right. As we get going, we'll have introductions for all of you in just a minute, but I did want to start by telling you a little bit about me. My name is Sarah, and I'm going to be teaching today's class, as well as 2 upcoming in-person workshops in Sacramento and Colusa at the end of May and early June. Going in reverse order on this slide, I'll start with the last bullet. I really love purpose and cause-driven work that makes a difference. I'm originally from Kenya. I grew up as the daughter of missionaries in a very small rural village in eastern Kenya, and I've seen firsthand what really good cause-driven work can do and what not so great work can do. And so I love seeing very effective truly community building efforts. And I personally enjoy volunteering both locally and for causes back in Kenya and East Africa. On the personal front, I'm married to Jason, who was my middle school sweetheart, and we have 3 kids. And after over a decade of living in the Bay Area, we've recently relocated to Orangeville. And finally, on the professional front, I started doing grant proposal writing for a Girl Scout Council's Fund Development Department in Rancho Cordova when I was in college, and then went on to write grant proposals for a Boy Scout Council, starting a grant program from scratch for them, and then for the YMCA of San Joaquin County. I really loved the storytelling, getting funders to care and invest, working with amazing people, and winning grants. After that, for the last 14 years, I've worked in tech in the Bay Area at a startup, at Google, and most recently at Intuit. I've worked in sales, strategy, business operations, and product, and have spent the last 5 years in executive leadership roles, most recently as a vice president at Intuit. 2 of my superpowers are making the complex simple and getting people to care and to take action. So to do that, I built on the same storytelling foundation that I initially built as that grant proposal writer, and then in sales, and then in all of those roles over the last 14 years in tech. And through writing a lot of different strategy case for funding papers, I'd say business cases and strategy papers are kind of the cousins to the grant proposal. And I've been on both sides of the request as both the person who asks for money to do something and then someone who's deciding where to invest. This workshop is going to bring together that background in fund development and grants, and then 14 years of tech corporate experience. And in those roles, I've seen again and again how strong storytelling can really accelerate impact and how poor storytelling can really hinder it and keep you from being able to have strong impact. I really love coaching teams and individuals in those strong storytelling and communication techniques. And I hope that today we will be able to give you some tools that will help you accelerate your impact. And now, before we go into introductions, I just want to have a few housekeeping notes. Please make sure you've got somewhere to take notes, paper, pen, write things down. It'll help you internalize and learn and take away things. So make sure you've got somewhere to write some things down. I'd encourage you to put aside your Slack, your phone, if you've got your email up, anything that's going to distract you, just put it aside. You've decided to spend some of your afternoon here, and it will be much more worthwhile if you are not distracted. So go ahead and close those apps down and tuck them away. And then lastly, I would love to have everyone really lean in and participate today. This will be interactive. I will ask questions and ask you to give input. And I ask that you please jump in, ask your questions, be part of the conversation. And if you can, please try to keep your video on. I know sometimes we have to turn it off for a few minutes, but I would ask that you please try to keep your video on. All right, for group introductions, I'd like everybody to go ahead and take the chat. If you've got that handy, you should see it in the Zoom. And in the chat, put your name, your organization, and something you love about your county that you're working in. So that's county, not country, your county. And then once you've done that and introduced yourself, in your own notebook, so personal, don't put it in the chat, write down how you would rate your grant writing confidence, 1 to 10, and why. And then secondly, write down some intentions for the day. So what are you hoping that you will gain from today's session? So 1 introduction in the chat, and then 2 things yourself. Give everybody a minute to do that. And remember, it's one thing you love about your county, and it can be something related to your work, or it can be something about the scenery or a place you love to eat or something else. It doesn't have to be on track with your funding proposal, but what's something you love about your county? Love that, Edward, the lasting change from leadership, the college environment in Chico, floating on the river, excellent. Real diversity, beautiful location, upper foothills, potential for growth. And I love that one up there from Michael, the kindness to neighbors, lots of diverse backgrounds. All right. And then once you've introduced yourself in the chat, make sure you've given yourself a rating for how you would rate your confidence to submit a competitive grant proposal and why, and then what you hope to gain from today. Got a lot of beautiful scenery notes. Love it. All right, I'd love to have a few people share how you rated yourself, and this is a safe place. Please be honest. Don't worry about what you rated yourself, but just tell us why you chose the number you did, and maybe a few things that you hope to gain today. So I'm just going to go ahead and call on a few folks. Katie, could you kick us off?
Because I have written several grants and I have had some successes and some different grants funded. But there's always a lot of room for improvement. I've also had a lot of disappointments and a lot of grants not funded. And I have known in my organization some really great grant writers that had been writing grants for 20 years and would just consistently get funding. They were so good at doing that. And so I understand there's a big gap between where I am and where I've seen some of my, my mentors that I look up to, where they are and how I can get from where I am to where they are. So, yeah.
Awesome. Thank you. And I think you were very soft at the beginning, but did you say 6?
Yes.
Okay, awesome. So looking for kind of those, how can you jump up and get to that place where you feel the consistent confidence that you've seen other people have had before? Thank you. All right, Edward, how about you?
Yes, I would say I am a strong 5. Woo-hoo to the 5s out there. I would say that I've had years of experience in program oversight management, right? Grant writing hasn't always been my strong suit. Have won some grants in the past, more smaller grants. And so really looking forward to how we can put together a competitive grant, not just for this, but of course also setting ourselves up for continued success in the future.
Awesome. All right, how about Cindy?
I gave myself, maybe I was too generous, gave myself 7, 8, so maybe 7.5, because I have been successful in getting some pretty nice grants for us. And they were the first of the grants that I've written. So I'm going to give myself a little bit high on that, but definitely room for improvement. I believe that the reason that I gave myself that is feel that I try to speak from the heart on the matter. And so it gives a little bit more than just a transactional feel to it. I think that has helped. And but yeah, always looking to get much better. So
Awesome.
my intention is to do that in this session.
Yeah, great. I hope we will. Let's get just a few more. Lovedeep?
I would rate my grant writing skills at probably, I want to say like a 2 or a 3 out of 10. I've actually never written a formal grant. I think the extent of my experience with grant writing is kind of at a project in undergrad where we were given to kind of work on grant writing, but I have had experience with writing other proposals and like legal briefs and things like that. So I think a lot of those ways of thinking and processing information, I'm hoping will be transferable to this, but yeah, I wouldn't rate myself too high on this one.
Awesome. Well, so glad you're here. And I definitely think those things will be transferable. So you've got some things to build on. Let's see if we can help you connect some of those dots today. All right, let's get one more. Marissa, would you mind sharing?
Hi. Yeah, so I think I don't know, it's really hard to rate yourself. I want to give myself like a 5. I think I'm a pretty strong writer. And I actually think I'm a fairly strong grant writer. But I had a couple of grant proposals that got rejected recently. So I think that I need to build my confidence back up when it comes to that kind of stuff. So I would say a 5.
Awesome. So, what I heard from a lot of you is this feeling of I've got some things, some of you more than others, that I've either had experience in or feel really good about. But there was a theme on this like consistency of like, how do I consistently feel really strong and really confident as I'm submitting things? So my hope today is that we will help you 10x your confidence and give you tools that let you complete a strong RFP response to the We Prosper Together, but also help you feel confident as you go into the next situation where it'll be a different RFP or a different set of requirements, and really give you the empowerment to figure out, okay, what do I do when I get into a situation where I'm not quite sure, or I don't know what that thing is, or what do they want from me? What do I do? So we'll see how we do. We're going to come back to that later. But the hope is that this will be a session that really makes you empowered and that you'll be able to use these tools in this scenario, but also in others. All right, so let's start with a question. We're gonna keep talking. So again, please jump in, be engaged in the conversation, but I wanna hear from you all. What do you think makes an effective funding proposal? And go ahead and just hop off mute and call out or raise your hand or do the little hand thing and I'll call on you. But it's okay if it's a little messy. We're gonna just use the virtual format. We're a smallish group. We can talk. So what makes an effective funding proposal, do you think?
An effective funding proposal would address and speak directly to the objective of the grant itself.
Yep. Yeah, for sure. It covers what is asked for. That's great. What else?
Sarah, I think you guided us. It kind of has to have a compelling story. There's got to be a why to it.
Yeah. Okay. That's great. What are we talking about? And is it something that feels motivating that someone would want to fund? What else?
Data that it would apply to the problem statement and the solution.
Yeah, for sure. So how, that compelling story, how is it grounded in facts or figures or information that's not just like, random stories, but really, really grounded data. All right, anyone else have any thoughts on what makes an effective funding proposal?
Strong partnerships, collaboration.
Yeah, that one's great. And we'll talk a little bit more about that as we go, but definitely strong partnerships is a good one. So changing the question a little bit, what do you think makes an effective nonprofit or cause-driven organization?
One that meets the needs of the community.
Yeah, that's great.
And I'd add to that it's data driven, right? So not just us guessing what those needs are, but actually going out and talking to that community or communities about those needs.
I love that, Edward. We're going to talk a lot about that today, but that is so important. You're not just working in your office, figuring out the needs of the community, but you are connected very concretely to it. What else makes for an effective organization?
Strong leadership.
Yeah, definitely. Laura, how about you? Anything you think of?
Nothing is coming to mind right now.
Okay. All right. Any last things anyone can think of? All right. So the
I was just going
connection
to add,
here. Yeah, go ahead.
I was going to add willingness of the board, desire of your board to see a vision that maybe the executive director has.
Yeah. Yes, for sure. So, ultimately what makes a good proposal is what makes a good organization. And we touched on some of these as we talked, but you are supported by the people you're serving. Edward, you made that point really well. You're empowering other people to overcome challenges and help themselves. So we'll talk about this more later, but this isn't a savior complex moment. You want to be empowering. You want to do good work and have the record of results and thoughtful programs to show for it. And you want to take ongoing responsibility and accountability for that work. So if things can be better, if you can optimize, you're making it better. That's it. Hopefully you're already feeling more confident. Years ago, I took a grant proposal writing class in Sacramento from someone named Harvey Chess. He's an activist and he taught workshops for grant seekers. Looks like Kathy, you're familiar. He's since written a book as well. And he loved to talk about that relationship between excellent fund proposals and organizational excellence. And so this is really, really key to remember, because what it comes down to is that funders want to give money to organizations that are going to use it most effectively. They are trying to maximize their return on investment or their ROI. And so they want the money that they're spending and investing to have the very most impact that it can. And this is what the proposal review process is all about. Where will our money have the most impact? Funders do not want to fund proposals or organizations that don't demonstrate these 4 things that we have on the screen. And some of the other great ones you mentioned, leadership was mentioned. I would say that's a key part of that proven track record. So are you an organization that has people in leadership who are doing the things they said they would do, evaluating how that is going, filling out the paperwork that's requested if it was for a grant? You're going to have a high say-do ratio. And what funders want to see is this an organization that we can trust with our money to have the very biggest impact that money can have? Okay, so you might be saying, all right, so is that it? Is there not some secret formula? Give us a secret formula. Well, I have worked for the last 8 years at Intuit in various strategy roles. And one thing that we love in strategy is a good framework. So I don't have a secret formula for you, but I do have a framework. And this is what we're going to use today as we go through our class. A competitive grant proposal is the sum of the effectiveness of your organization plus thorough preparation plus great storytelling. So we just talked about effectiveness and reputation. Funders want to fund organizations that will do good work and maximize their investment. Thorough preparation is exactly what it sounds like, and that's what we're going to spend most of our time on today. And good storytelling is how you package everything up, how you communicate all of this. That previous slide, how do you explain it and convey it and help someone like see that? You know, we talked earlier about that idea of like the story bringing it to life. And then that's something that will also be part of the in-person workshops. Quite a big focus there will be that storytelling. So we will touch on it today as well. We have a section at the end that will give us, I think, some great tools as you start writing and drafting. But that's a little teaser and pitch for the in-person workshops also. We'll talk more about that effectiveness as we go, but let's go ahead and jump right into thorough preparation. So thorough preparation, I would say, is the combination of understanding what the RFP and funding organization are asking for, and then creating a very strong plan for how you will deliver those things. So how can we make sure that we really understand the assignment of this RFP that you all are working on right now? We prosper together. Go ahead and hop off mute again. I want to hear what you all think we need to do to understand this assignment.
Read it.
Read it. Yes, Katie. And if you haven't printed it, I would say print it, underline it, highlight it, read it again. You definitely want to make sure that you catch every little detail in there that might be helpful for you. All right, what else can we do to understand the assignment?
If available, submit questions to the funder.
Yes, definitely. So have you all spent time on the Q&A that's published? Have you seen this? Okay,
Yes.
so this is a great resource to go to, and you can add to it by asking questions if you have them. So this is another great place to go. Thank you. All right, what else?
Read the strategy doc.
Read the strategy document. Which one are you talking about? Is it the regional plan?
Yes.
Yes,
Thank
so
you.
the regional plan is referenced in the RFP, and this is a gold mine of information. There's some great data in here. You know, if you want to think like the funder, the people who are going to read your proposal, this is a great way to understand what do they care about, how are they talking about things, and to actually find little snippets or ways of talking about things that you might want to borrow and use as you talk about your programs or what you're planning to do also. And there's the regional plan, and there's an executive summary also, which has a lot of the same information, but those are both great resources. What else? Did anyone go to the proposers conference? If you did not go, this is also recorded, and it's a great way to break down the RFP and to know what's being asked of you. And I think right about maybe minute 20, we have Alan, the COO of Valley Vision, going through each section by section, talking about every single detail that's being asked for. So if you're like, what is going to be a successful application? Filling out exactly what is in the RFP and what Alan is covering is going to be a successful application. And so this is a great place to gather more information, help yourself feel confident, and even pick up some little snippets of information that maybe you didn't have. So here's a little pop quiz. Does anyone know where in the proposal you have the chance to get 16 points instead of 8? What is it for?
Tradable sectors versus opportunity. Is that the one?
Yeah, it's which types of jobs are you working on creating? And so knowing that helps you go in and say, okay, let's make sure we're really hitting that. Or maybe that's not what you're focused on and you're going to get the 8 points, but now you know that was a place that I didn't get the full 16, but I really believe in my vision in this project. And so I'm going to make it up in these other places. But either way, you want to know and you want to have that information so that you can fill out the best possible proposal that you can. All right, what else? There's still some things I think that would be useful to look at and I haven't heard them. Can anyone think of more places where you can go to make sure that you really understand what is being asked for?
There's the folks that have been awarded already, that their plans and
Yeah,
think I saw that.
that's great. So here's the website, We Prosper Together. This itself is great to go through, more little nuggets all over. And as Cindy just said, there's this awesome section called Projects, where the round 1 portfolio is actually detailed. And you can click into any of these and get a little bit more information about that project. So this is an awesome place to go and learn and look for places where you can either be inspired, or maybe it helps you understand, like, okay, well, what was pre-development? What did that actually mean? And so I'd encourage you to definitely spend time here and think about how this can help you better understand the RFP. And also, this gives you a model of what really good looks like and what types of projects are going to be funded. All right, I'll mention one last one, this fact book, which Gretchen talked about in the proposers conference last week. There's a ton of data in here, and so we talked about data a little bit before, but this is a great place to find some of that data. And definitely a spot to look as well. All right. So I think we've covered all of these. Let's just recap. You'd want to read that RFP multiple times, watch that proposers conference. Oh, we didn't talk about this. If any of you submitted to the round 1 and did not get funded, I believe you received some feedback. That is a place to spend some time also. Make sure you understand it. Think about how you can address it. But that is, personal input and feedback, so a super valuable source. And then we just illustrated that chance to research on the website, funded projects. We didn't pull up any of the press releases, but the press releases are a great place to go as well. And you really want to get to know everything you possibly can about the We Prosper Together effort, Valley Vision, this whole initiative, so that you can write a proposal that really matches. And on that note, just to make sure we reiterate, we're doing this research to check, do we actually qualify? So you could write the best proposal ever, and if you don't qualify, it doesn't matter. So save yourself a lot of time and effort by figuring this out up front and doing your research. Secondly, we're doing this research so that we can write a really well-matched proposal. We want to make sure that we're meeting the criteria that the funder wants. They're trying to maximize their ROI, and they're also trying to make sure that they are funding things that are right on track with these things that they care a lot about and have already identified. And then finally, you want to give yourself strategic leverage. So, we just talked about a lot of time doing that research. Well, time savings will come back in if you can leverage some of those snippets, some of those data points, some of those ways of talking to strengthen your application when you're working on it. Quick pause there. Any questions about the research process or making sure you really understand the assignment? Everybody feeling okay? Okay, please jump in if you've got questions. I definitely want to make sure that we're addressing those. So let's do a little exercise together. We're gonna just do some scoring ourselves. And before I do, does anyone have the first page of the RFP, and can you tell me what it is? Not the title, not the table of contents, but what's the very first thing in the RFP?
Eligibility checklist.
That's right. And what do you have to do to be eligible? Katie?
You want me to kind of go through the checklist?
Yeah, just summarize those 4 things.
You have to be in the region, in one of the working in the counties that the thing covers. You have to be doing a pre-development project, not an implementation project. You have to be working in either one of the tradable sectors or one of the opportunity sectors. You have to benefit disadvantaged communities. And I know you have to be a not a for-profit. I don't see that on here, but I know that's another thing too.
You're right. Yeah, good. Bonus points. So there was another section where it talks about how, yeah, you are one of these certain types of organizations, not a for-profit organization, though you can partner with a nonprofit organization if you are. So the location is kind of a gimme since you all introduced yourself and talked about your counties. I think no one snuck through, but I think you're all good there. But these other three things, pre-development, targeting job creation, economic equity. Did you get that last economic equity one, Katie? Or was it?
I think I said you have to benefit disadvantaged community.
Yes. Yep, you got
communities.
it. So does anyone have any questions about what these three mean? Or do you all feel pretty good? Okay, I'm gonna take that as pretty good. And if you need,
Sarah.
go ahead, Michael. Yeah.
So I heard the term creation of jobs, and I would like to better understand what this group thinks that means. I was looking at helping to train, students in skills that would let them work in certain jobs. Maybe that's not a fit for this. I'm just curious because I wouldn't be creating jobs. I'd be creating students who are ready for jobs or people that are ready for jobs.
Let's
Um,
get input from the group. What do you all think?
So to touch on that, Dean Bagley, I would say that you are paying the internship. So that essentially is creating a job situation.
That is true. I mean, the students who aren't would be getting work.
Sorry, Michael, I'm thank you for bringing that up because that was exactly the question that I had too. Because, and I don't know if creating internships, Laura, I don't know if that would qualify because I think there were a few people that applied, I think, and got that because it's workforce development, like training, lots of people are thinking like, oh, training programs, let's put together a training program for this or that, or this population or that population. But I think a lot of those folks got feedback that said something like, this doesn't create jobs. So yeah, I have the same question, especially since for-profit companies are usually the job creators. I don't know, and they're not allowed to apply for this. So, can
They
we
can be-
talk more about what job creation looks like? Like examples
Yeah.
would be great.
Yeah,
Can't for-profits can be partners.
absolutely. Yeah, for-profits can be partners. So let's look at the RFP. So let's go back to that primary source. And on page 4, we see the purpose of funding is to invest in industries that will advance environmentally sustainable, future-focused, high-quality job opportunities. So we see that advancement of job opportunities, and we want to think about how does this connect to that? I think one easy hangup can be that in pre-development, you might not have all the jobs yet, right? Like what you're doing in this pre-development phase is setting something up so that it could drive those job opportunities, but the jobs might not necessarily exist at the end of the pre-development phase. You're doing the work that would help set up the potential for either a pilot to expand or something that will then kind of unlock those jobs. So I think that might be one piece that might help folks is to sort of separate pre-development from what would be the development phase where the jobs would hopefully exist and be coming to fruition and be, people would be coming in to use them. And so what can you do in the pre-development phase that sets up the potential for those jobs? Where else can we go to learn more about this one? Because this one is definitely, I think, a good one to spend time on. But does anyone else have any input or places where you've spent some time thinking this one through? So on page 6, there's this bit about pilot projects, scalable test projects that demonstrate innovative workforce pathways in priority industry sectors. leading to high quality jobs for disinvested communities. So obviously, you know, not everything will have a pilot component. That's fine. It doesn't have to. But that is a place where we can kind of take the clues that that section gives us, which is this funder wants to be funding things that are going to lead to high quality jobs for disinvested communities. And so if you have a project that doesn't actually connect, then you're going to need to think about, can we change this? How can we adjust this to do that? Or maybe we're not applicable for this one. And that's not a call I can make for you, but I'd say push yourself to really make sure you are lined up with what the goals are of the funder.
I'm wondering if who you have, quote unquote, in the room when you were developing your pre-development, and if that would be potential employers as partners in a pilot, a workforce pilot, or whatever it is, if that would narrow the pipeline well enough to give a project like Dean Bagley's a better opportunity.
I love that idea, Kathy. I think that's a really smart idea. How do you bring, if you feel like, well, how am I going to create the jobs? But you can think of where those might be created through partners, and you get those people to be part of your application and thinking it through. That sounds like a really strong proposal to me. Marissa, you have a question?
Yeah, sorry, I need to backtrack just a minute. I think I need a little bit of clarification on what Michael and Katie were kind of talking about. So it sounds, because I interpreted the RFP, I think in the same way that Michael did, where my thoughts were on providing training so that people could access existing high quality jobs, or you know, jobs that were, I guess, up and coming high quality jobs that paid well. People that had a difficult time accessing that training. So my thoughts were, you provide this workforce training, and that is a pipeline to these quality jobs. But it sounds like what they're looking for is investment in the industries that would house those jobs. So I just want to make sure that's clear, because my thought was investment in locals so that they could access those jobs, rather than investment in industry that would provide those jobs. I don't know if I'm making sense, but it's a slightly different.
So, yeah, I'm not part of Valley Vision, and so I hope I'm not giving you wrong guidance, but I would go again off of the RFP that says building capacity for quality job creation. So that is creation to me, that we want at the end of this for there to be more high quality jobs in the counties that you're all working in. And so if you're focused on a project that is building capacity in people so they could go and get jobs, that sounds great. But it sounds like maybe you'll need to do some additional thinking for how can you connect that capacity building to that next step. The good news is, because this is a pre-development project, maybe some of that is going to come in the development phase. And as long as you make that really explicit and clear of how you see that there could be a path. And I loved Kathy's point on partnering with other organizations. So maybe part of the pre-development phase is we plan to work with X, Y, and Z local organizations who have the capability to post jobs and build up their workforce to explore opportunities as part of this pre-development phase, with the hope that we will identify, and I'm making this up, we will identify 5 to 10 new roles that we could partner on releasing over the course of the next year. And in parallel, we'll be offering these trainings that will help people be ready to then take those roles. But I do think, to me, based on looking at the RFP and what you're all saying, it is wanting to see a direct connection to job creation. Does that help?
It does. Thank you.
Okay. All right, good question. Let's actually try, you mentioned having some examples. So let's give this a go. So those 3 criteria, pre-development, and that was one that if you watched the proposers conference, you saw Renee talk about how two of the kind of pitfalls from last time were the pre-development connection and the job creation connection. And so I think that these are places to really think extra critically about. Would someone be willing to just read this one kind of quickly, but so we can all hear it? And while they are reading, score it in your mind for those three categories. Would you say yes or no for those three things? Let's see. Lovedeep, do you mind reading this?
No, I can read this. The whole thing.
Yep.
Gotcha. Okay. YOLO Climate Smart Ag Innovation Hub. The YOLO Climate Smart Ag Innovation Hub is an exploratory pre-development project designed to assess the feasibility of establishing a regional center in West Sacramento focused on regenerative agriculture, climate resilient food systems, and biotech-driven soil health solutions. This initiative aims to support job creation in the working land and biotechnology sectors by building workforce pipelines for middle skill roles such as lab and field technicians, agricultural equipment maintenance workers, and production specialists. Catalyst funding will support critical early stage activities such as market analysis, environmental review of the proposed brownfield site, and the development of a community benefits agreement co-created with historically disinvested communities in Southport and Broderick. The project will also fund capacity building for local BIPOC-led agricultural cooperatives, ensuring community-led planning and equitable economic participation.
Thank you. And just to make sure I say it, this was written by AI based on the proposal. So this is nobody's project. What do you all think? Does this qualify?
Yes.
Yes. Okay, Cindy, why?
Oh man, no, just kidding. No, I see several things here. They're clearly saying it's pre-development, which is a criteria here. And it's tying it to the job creation that would happen, and it's identifying the sectors that would be, and those are, I think, considered some of the tradable sectors. So yeah, I think for those reasons are the main ones that I see that popped out as really strong points there.
Yeah, so we've got all three of these being addressed. We've got pre-development, targeting job creation. So back to our discussion a few minutes ago, the jobs aren't going to all exist at the end of this pre-development project, but work will have been done to figure out how can we create them. And so I think that that is the key to remember, is what part of your proposal is really addressing the job creation part. And if you're only thinking about equipping people to take jobs, you're missing a second piece to that, which is what are those jobs and how do we advance them in some way?
So Sarah, to go along with that, what I read there really clearly was the feasibility of establishing a regional center. To me, if you're creating some sort of regional center, that's where the jobs will obviously be.
Exactly. Yep.
Yeah, just check.
Exactly. Yep. And maybe you do this and you realize like it's not feasible. And along the way of the pre-development, you have to pivot and you go back to Valley Vision and talk about it. And you say, we realized actually that this is the better route. That all feels reasonable. And if you went to the proposers conference, you heard Alan talk about like budget modifications or updating things. Back to this idea of, funders want to maximize their ROI. They want to see really, really thoughtful proposals, but they also know that things will change over the course of time. And so along the way, you might realize something about this isn't quite the right plan, and that's okay. And then you can figure it out and pivot as you need to, but do the thinking up front so that the path and connection point is very clear to say, here's what we plan to do, and here's exactly how it ties to the pre-development side, the job creation piece, and the disinvested communities. All right. This is another, we're not going to do this one. This one is, we won't read it out loud, but this is another example I'd say that pretty much hits all three. Let's go ahead and do this one. And let's have, Edward, do you mind reading this one aloud?
Not a problem. Calusa Riverfront Pavilion. The Calusa Riverfront Pavilion project proposes the construction of a new event venue and public amphitheater along the Sacramento River, designed to boost local tourism and generate revenue through weddings, festivals, and seasonal markets. The project team is requesting catalyst funds to begin construction immediately. Having already selected contractors and finalized architectural design, once completed, the pavilion is expected to draw visitors from surrounding counties and support local small businesses through vendor space rentals and promotional opportunities.
What do you all think? Do we qualify or not? No,
No.
why not?
Not pre-development.
Not pre-development. So a key, if you, in the RFP, you probably saw, you cannot have any money going towards construction. So we are not in the pre-development phase. What else?
I think also it doesn't hit one of the criteria of uplifting the local BIPOC communities or actual residents of the area. It's just bringing in new business and new tourism, which doesn't always benefit the people that are actually living, working, and going to school in the region.
Totally. All right, anything else?
Who's the proposer? Is it a
Who's the proposer?
nonprofit?
Yeah, it is a nonprofit, but it's our fictional AI-driven nonprofit. Good one, Kathy. You're thinking around, looking around corners. I'd say the last thing to take away from this one is the job creation connection is also not clear. So cool that we're going to boost the economy and maybe some of these local vendors, but are we talking about those priority sectors? Are we talking about the opportunity sectors? Where is that connection? And it is not clear. All right. So on this one, we're not going to read it out loud, but why doesn't everybody just take 20 seconds, 30 seconds to read it, and we'll talk about this one. This is the Sutter Soil Tech Pilot Program.
Anyways, you can increase the font on that.
Oh yeah. Is it too hard to see? I don't know if I can. Is it too hard to see for everybody?
I'll just take a picture of it and then magnify the picture.
Okay, good idea. Thank you. Okay. What do you all think about this one? How do we do on our criteria? Michael?
Yeah, I'll jump in. It really is, but it's really funny. I think Kathy's probably smiling. It looks the idea kind of is similar to what a group that I'm working with is looking at. It says pre-development, you're kind of trying to figure out what model will work to prepare local people to get the skills they need to work in this industry. I think the thing that makes possible job creation is this long-term training hub. And to me, that makes it feels like that could be a source where jobs would be ongoing, maybe if it's even just training people for the jobs. But again, a training hub would require people to work. So I think that might be the little connection for job creation. So I'm hoping it would fit.
Well, and what about, do you feel like you've got the disinvested communities clearly?
It does say underserved rural communities.
Yeah.
So I'm
Yeah.
feeling it's addressed. It's not as straight explaining that, but underserved makes me feel they're looking at communities that have been disinvested.
Yeah. So I'll skip ahead a little bit. We'll talk more about this later, but we're going to talk later about reader empathy. Now imagine you're the reader and you're sitting here and you're like, yeah, that's a good keyword. And does that fit? And like your brain is starting to hurt. You don't want your readers' brains to be hurting when they're reading your application. You want it to be super crystal clear. So it is not a middle ground gray area, but you have drawn the connections explicitly. So great, this one's got a very strong, I'd say, pre-development focus, check. But as Michael mentioned, we've got some question mark areas in the middle there that are worthy of some more clarification. So don't hope that someone will maybe kind of just get it. Make it clear. So what is the direct connection to that job creation? And if it is this training hub, then I would say it needs to be much more explicitly clear of like, what exactly is going to come from that? What jobs is it creating? Is it a training hub that you hope will have X many people and the trainers are in these industries specifically, like it's a biotech hub or it's some other thing, but like, what is the connection to the jobs? And then just building the capacity in these people doesn't quite feel like enough. And so I want to go back to Kathy's great idea of what if this one were partnered with 5 local organizations who have jobs that come up that the training hub would be tied to, and part of the pre-development was working with them to figure out a pipeline between the training hub and those organizations. And again, I'm making it up, but all of a sudden I'm starting to see the connective tissue that lets me envision that jobs will be created in these areas that we want to see them created in. And then I think we're like a pretty good on the disinvested communities, but even being more clear and explicit of like, who are these underserved people? Let's be super clear, would benefit this write-up too. All right, so let's do, I think just one more, and let's have, let's see, Laura, do you mind reading this one? Placer Outdoor Economy Enhancement.
The Placer Outdoor Economy Enhancement Initiative is a pre-development effort aimed at supporting local tourism and small business growth across the Sierra foothills. The project focuses on planning and preparing for a network of scenic byways, bike-friendly routes, and visitors signage. Yeah. They'll connect outdoor recreation areas to small business hubs in Auburn, Colfax, and nearby communities. Proposed activities designing wayfinding elements, coordinating with local partners to identify signage locations, and developing a marketing strategy to promote Placer County as a year-round outdoor destination. The initiative includes the purchase and isolation of branded signs and kiosks as a way to quickly activate tourism corridors and boost exposure for local shops, cafes, and lodging providers, especially during the slower travel seasons.
All right, what do we think?
No clear workforce connection?
Yep, no clear workforce connection. What else? This one has like a sneaky element. Does anyone see it? The first line looks pretty good. The Placer Outdoor Economy Enhancement Initiative is a pre-development effort. But is it a pre-development effort? It's talking about putting up signs and doing the thing. It's talking about something that is ready to go. So this one, in my mind, is not pre-development, which, we talked about pulling in those keywords from all the research. You can slap those keywords anywhere you want, but if they're not true, your readers will be able to tell. So don't say it's pre-development. If it's not pre-development, they will see that. And be careful that you're using those words appropriately and correctly. So just having it say it, it's like the lipstick on a pig. It's not going to necessarily help you unless it's truly pre-development or truly connecting with, the people that you're trying to serve. This one, we're not going to read, but this one actually is pulled directly from the website of the round 1 that were funded. And I wanted to show you how, putting this right in context, we can see right here the connection to addressing workforce shortages. We can see the disinvested communities with this focus on, let's see where it is. I feel like it was in this one. Am I missing it? So we definitely see the connection to the quality jobs. And so maybe, oh yeah, the veteran community. So in this case, and that's the disinvested community that we're focused on. Now, I do think if you attended the proposers conference, you noticed that Gretchen gave an updated definition of the disinvested communities, I believe there, or there is one in your RFP. If you look at page 9 at the top. And so this is one of the things that I believe has been updated since the previous round to just be a little bit more clear on what we're talking about. And with that definition in mind, this one fits really well.
Sarah, before you go
Yeah.
further, and I apologize for this may be a bad question, but you just showed us an example of Greater Sacramento Talent Pipeline. You're saying that was funded in the first round? Did they
This one
have,
was.
what can you, is it related to what we're doing now in the sense that's pre-development and it's job creation? Is that what they wanted?
It was. So the first round was also focused on pre-development and job creation.
So it's interesting because I'm looking at this, it really is, it's talking about bridging the gap between seekers and employers. I don't necessarily see new jobs being created from it.
It's a good point, Michael. And you know, I was not one of the readers, so I think based on the writing that we have here, you raise a super good point. What we don't have is the rest of the RFP. And
Yeah.
so without the rest of it, I can't speak to your question, but I think it's a fair place to push on. But I would say, you know, go with the strong, clear criteria and make sure yours makes the connections explicit. And for the sake of assumptions, I would assume this one did in their RFP. Marissa?
Yeah, hi. So I don't know if this is the place to even ask this, but one of the things, just touching on looking at projects that were funded in the first round, one of the things that I noticed looking at the RFPs were, it's the definition of quality jobs and the hourly pay rate for those jobs. So in my mind, some of the projects that were funded might create jobs, but not jobs that are going to meet that criteria. And so I'm wondering how much importance is actually placed on that definition. It's mentioned multiple times in the RFP, and it certainly limits what kind of jobs you're talking about creating if you're going by that hourly pay scale. So I don't know if that's something that you can touch on at all.
Yeah, so I will touch on it. I don't have like a you know, again, I didn't write the RFP and I don't have the concrete answer, but what I would say is you triangulate the whole RFP. So go to the place where the scoring comes in, and we're going to do this in a minute. Actually, we're going to kind of build a rubric, but look for where are you going to get points and check to see, is there a place where the points tie back explicitly to that? If so, you're going to lose points if you're not making that connection. If it doesn't tie back, then I think like you've got a little bit of gray area and you got to think about like, okay, well, clearly it's important to them because it's outlined in the RFP, but it doesn't seem to be something that's driving a big set of the points value. So do with that as you feel makes sense. The strongest proposal will be one that still makes an explicit connection and does in some way tie to those like pay categories. But you're working with a little more maybe fuzzy ground. But you want to take this whole RFP as like, this is the what excellent looks like. If you touched absolutely everything, check, 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 then you would have an excellent proposal. I know sometimes we can't always, and we don't want to like overly like squish something into a place it doesn't fit, but you don't want to just write it off either. And so I hope that helps a little bit. I know that's not perfect guidance, but I would really follow the scoring, look for where the scoring is connected to that explicitly. If so, it'll affect your points for sure. If not, it's going to be a little bit more fuzzy, but it will still probably be something that does matter in just like the scheme of your whole story. All right, and we're gonna go do that in just a moment. Check out create an RFP scoring guide. As we go into this next session, we just spent time on understanding the assignment. We made sure that we understood what qualifies. And again, you know, as you have questions around that, you can reach out to the Q&A email address that was listed, and that document will continue to live populate, or live update, so you can see what other people have asked, and maybe you need to get clarification on something, you can also submit your questions. Make sure you read what other people have submitted first, use the different sources you have, but you do have a way to reach out and ask some clarifying questions. Okay, so once you understand what is being asked of you, you want to plan ahead to win. So June 15th, I believe, is the date that you all need to submit your RFPs. As you think about now to June 15th, what do you think are some of the components of that plan in order to build a really strong proposal?
Meeting with your team that's going to help write the grant, or your partners in the grant.
Yeah, meet with your partners, meet with the team that's going to contribute, figure out who is the team. Yeah, on that one, Kathy, I'd actually encourage everyone to really push your mindset or understanding of team to think about, like, who do you need to maybe help you with data? Who do you need to maybe help with this or that part of the RFP? But also, who else can help you have a stronger application? So Kathy's mentioned your partners a few times, and that is such a great one. Partners could look like a lot of different things. Maybe it's like a partner who's with you completely, you're doing everything hand in hand. Great, that's an awesome partnership. They should read the RFP too. Maybe it's a partner who is just going to give you some great input. And you reach out to somebody and you say, hey, you're working in, you know, this industry in our region. We're working on this grant proposal and we'd love to get your feedback. Would you be willing to read a draft and give us input? All of a sudden you have a partner who is just going to help you make a stronger application. Think about people who are on your board. Maybe you're nervous about your budgets, and someone on your board has a really strong business background and is really great at budgets, and they could give you feedback on your budget. Maybe you have someone in this room who you know, and you're working on really different proposals, but you agree to give each other feedback and to give each other a reading for your document. So think about partnerships, think about that team, both in the, like, of course, there's the obvious, like, people maybe you're sitting next to in the office, but there's probably some other people who could give you input that would make you have an even stronger application also. What else goes into that plan ahead to win? Well, it says it on the slide, so it's kind of a gimme, but a timeline. Take your June 15th date and work backwards. Give yourself some cushion, like you don't want to be frantic at the end, all of a sudden having technical difficulties. Give yourself time for draft reviews. If you're going to go ask other people to read it, give them time to read it and give you feedback. And all of a sudden, you're going to realize that now to then is a pretty busy time period. You want to give yourself some buffer too. You don't want to look at this thing every single day and then kind of like lose sight of the prize. Do good drafting, step away for a day or two or three, come back, read with fresh eyes, and build all of that time in, but give yourself a lot of time, because this is stuff that can definitely take a lot of time, and there's probably things you're going to need to chase down. Maybe it's going to be a partnership that you realize, like, this would just be so much stronger if we were working with a for-profit organization, and we need to figure out who that can be and, like, get going on a plan for that. Okay, let's kick off that work stream. Or maybe you're realizing, like, I need some data to help me illustrate the problem in our area. Like, this is such a big issue. We're really struggling with X, but I don't have the data points. They're not in this data book. Like, oh, but I know this other, like, this group has been doing a survey that maybe they have the results on. I'm going to reach out to them. I need to give myself some time. Like, think about all those different things that you need to do and build the timeline that helps you then have milestones that you can hit. One of the questions that came up in the registration was around just like scoring and how do I know what's required of me? Is that anything that the rest of you have wondered about? I see a few nods. Okay, so let's take the RFP. Here it is. And let's just build a rubric. So this is what I would do if I were trying to make sure that I was gonna not miss anything and hit all of the requirements. So I'm going here to the beginning of the details for the RFP. So identifying information, I'm literally just gonna go ahead and copy and paste. And then I'm gonna go to a blank page and paste it. And obviously we need to do a little bit of reformatting. And a nice little trick if you have used Google Docs is you can, you can create these cool checkboxes. So I'm gonna go ahead and we have a finished version of this, so I don't have to spend quite so much time reformatting. This one doesn't have any point value, but it does give you key things you have to have. So you're just gonna go ahead and have it. And then the next one was org qualifications. I'm not gonna spend time right now grabbing that one, but it's 24 points. There's 4 questions. They're probably worth 6 points each. I would just go ahead and imagine that they're each worth 6 points and then practice as you answer them, like scoring yourself on those 6. Like, do you think you have an answer that's going to be 6 points? Do you think you have an answer that is 2 points? How can you make it 6? Let's do the project description together. So again, we'll jump back over here. We'll paste it. And we'll do some reformatting. So 40 points, 5 questions. How many points do y'all think each one of these is worth?
8
Maybe
points.
8 points. Yes. And I don't know for sure, but that's what I'm assuming. And it will help me then to be very focused as we go through. So I've got a finished one here. It's literally just copy and paste from the RFP. And then I'm mapping out 6 points, 8 points. Here's my one where I can get 16 or 8 points. Work plan, it's 24 points. There's 3 questions. On the budget, there were 16 points. And so I'm gonna say this one is probably a gimme, your fiscal contact. Like, you have to have it, but it's probably not worth points. And I decided to give my 8 points to the other 2. So that was just judgment. That made sense to me as I read it. 16 points for this section. There's 2 heavy hitters, and then there's just a checkbox one. I'm going to give them each 8 points. But the budget one is actually a good example. So we grabbed what was on the RFP, but can anyone think of anything about the budget that wasn't on the RFP, but is still applicable? So let's go down here. Here's what was there in the budget, just these 3 things.
So small that I can freaking see.
Was there anything about here, and let me, would it be helpful to make this a little bigger, Kathy?
Yes.
Is that better?
Yes, thank you.
Okay. So does anyone remember any guidance around indirect costs or administrative costs?
I heard the
10%?
question was asked yesterday. I think it was like up to 10% is what was said. That I heard that for indirect.
Yeah, so that is something that is, let's see, oops. Right here on the Q&A, we have a question about indirect costs. What is the limit for indirect costs? And the answer is indirect costs cannot exceed 10% inclusive of administrative costs. So this one's a little tricky because it wasn't right there in the RFP, but it is very much in the proposers conference. I believe it showed up, and it shows up here in the Q&A. And so I'm going to go ahead and add that to my document, and I'm going to remind myself where I got it. So Q&A doc, so I can find that later. What about the timeline? What's the timeline for funding? Anyone find that?
Before we
Yes, we
do,
can.
can you explain a little bit more about this includes administrative costs?
So indirect costs are usually the things that like aren't directly tied to the project. So it might be like the cost to run payroll at an organization, or it's like the overhead. And so you can have up to 10% of the proposal for those indirect costs. The direct costs would be tied specifically to the pre-development project. This is not tied specifically, but it's 10% that could go towards just running your organization.
So in your mind, indirect is 10% of the total proposed budget?
Yeah, it cannot be more than 10%.
Right, okay. Sometimes it's 10% of the staffing, but okay, the total proposed budget.
I'm just going off of what it says in the Q&A, and it says indirect costs cannot exceed 10%. So that's what I would stick to.
So along those lines, this is always confusing to me, but when it says inclusive of administrative costs, and there are administrative costs that are tied directly to, the project itself, like staffing costs to deliver on the project, and then there are staffing costs, outside of that. So the 10%. Mhm.
Yeah, I would say that think of it as, is it something that would be happening if you weren't doing the project? And if the answer is no, then that's something tied to the project. So it's a project manager who's working on the project.
Mhm.
They are part of the project costs. Is
Yeah.
payroll running all the time for your organization? Yes. Is, are there other things that are happening all the time to the day-to-day of running your organization? Yes. You can take up to 10% of those other costs that are outside of the project, but obviously will affect the project because those people will be paid payroll too. And you can have 10% be tied to this. Does that make sense? So just think of it like, is this something that would happen if we don't get funded? And if the answer is yes, then that would be part of your administrative cost because it will like benefit your project, but it's not only going to happen if you have the project.
Okay, I think one more question might nail it for me. If then say your payroll increases, let's say it just hypothetically, it doubles the size of your staff. Then half the payroll costs could be part of that 10% and half would not be.
Okay, sorry. Let me clarify when I say payroll. Your payroll costs I see as like, who is the person who runs payroll? Their salary. They run payroll.
Okay, gotcha.
Maybe your payroll software that you pay for. So maybe you use QuickBooks.
Mhm.
Those are your administrative costs. The amount that people are being paid in payroll, keep that in a separate bucket.
All
So
right.
if your budget doubles because now you have 3 people and you used to have, or now you have 6 people and you used to have 3 people, and those 3 new people are focused on this project, those are project costs and their payroll, their salary is part of your project cost, the personnel section.
And the amount of the increased let's see, FTE that's put on administering that payroll or payroll fees from ADP or something like that could also be split that way, right?
I'd say so. I mean, again, just make
Okay.
sure that those indirect costs aren't more than 10%. So
Yeah,
whatever it's not that hard to find indirect costs. And so you just can't submit more than 10% and you can decide which ones make sense.
Okay.
All right. So we were asking about the timing. What's the time range for what this funding can cover? Does anyone remember?
So September 26th?
Yeah, September 30th, 2026, and then I give it all to you. There's also a note that it says there's no, so maybe I should say instead of cannot, likely cannot, because there is no max listed, but the guidance in the RFP says probably aim for 1 million or less. So in my little scoring guide, my rubric, I'm going to make sure I list those 3 things too. So I got to make sure my budget doesn't go past September 30, 2026. I'm not going to submit something for $2 million. And I'm gonna make sure that that 10%, I stay within that for my indirect and administrative costs. Again, I did note where I found each of those things. That's because 2 weeks from now, Sarah might not remember. And I want to make sure that I can remember where did that come from? Why am I coming up with that? But this is going to help me when I'm doing my own reading, my planning and my writing to be able to really make sure that I am putting myself in the scorer's shoes and I'm looking at exactly what they're going to look at. So have I given a detailed itemized budget? That's worth 8 points. Let's look at that. Have I given the clear budget narrative? That's worth 8 points. I know how much I'm being scored and I can see how I stack up. And this is a great document to give to those readers. Maybe the person sitting next to you at your organization, maybe the board member or the partner organization. But when you email them and say, hey, we're working on this great proposal, we'd love to send it to you. We're going to send it in a week. Give them a heads up. And then a week later, when you send it to them, send them this document too. Say, hey, here's the RFP. Here's the rubric that we've made. We'd love for you to read our answers with this in mind and let us know if there are any places where you would score us particularly low or you think we need more work. But all of a sudden you have this working document that helps you and your whole review team to really focus in and make sure that you're hitting it. And then if you run into some spots where it's like somebody says, hey, like, I don't think you hit that one. I would give that one like a 0 or a 2. Look at that, figure out why, understand it, ask a third person to weigh in, but really use this as a tool to help you figure out, are you on track, and to demystify this scoring process as you think about how your application will be scored. Any questions on that? Okay, so one other thing, and we've talked about budgets a little bit, but it was something I saw in the registration as well. There was some questions around like, how do I submit a good budget, or what does a good budget look like? And so this is another place where I'd say in your planning that you want to be thoughtful. Maybe you're a newer organization and you haven't done a lot of budgets, or maybe you like that one doesn't feel like it's in your comfort zone. Who can help you? Figure out who that can be and ask them for help. And go and look it up. So let's just imagine I'm not quite sure what the budget should be. I'm going to go over here and I'm going to put in project budget grant proposal to Google. Excuse me. I'm going to go ahead and click on images because visually it's more helpful for me to see. And there's a bunch of budgets here. Some of them might be better than others, but as you can see, they're all tables. And they look like they could be useful to build on. So let's go ahead and just click on this one. We'll go ahead and visit that site. Oh, interesting. So this is actually part of an article called 3 Tips for Creating an Awesome Budget, which maybe will be helpful. So I could read that article too, and I might take away some helpful things. And right here, I see this budget. And I can click into it and, you know, it doesn't necessarily look exactly right. Like, obviously we don't have 4 years to cover. Maybe I'd want to add some justification, but like, this isn't bad. This could be something I build on. I could do some editing to something like this. There's some good justification. They've got some different categories. Oh, that might be something that I could come back to. And so just right there, I'm just showing you like what I would do if I wasn't sure. The other thing I would do, which I'd say is always a good tip, is I'd actually just Google the organization that I'm submitting to and the word that I'm looking for. So Valley Vision budget. Maybe Valley Vision has published budgets for something else. Let's go ahead and see all. And interesting, there's a result here, the very first result. I'm going to download this and then I'm going to go over so you all can see this. There's a budget here for Valley Vision. I'm not sure exactly what this is. It's, you know, they didn't publish a template with this RFP. So it's definitely not quite right, but it looks pretty good. I'd probably get rid of this column. There's a justification column. Once the calculation, that stuff it asks for directly in the RFP. Personnel. This looks an awesome budget to build on. Plus, Valley Vision is the one who published it, so they probably like this format. So if I were you, I would take that as like, if I'm not sure, I don't have some other format, maybe this is something that I could build on and edit to be my own and to match my purposes. All right, let's go back over to where we were. Hold on.
While you're looking, I just have a quick question, and Alan,
Yeah.
I think, is still here. Kidsville Community Partnership was part of the community ambassadors for this, and we were asked to use a federal budget, an H1 budget, and when we got that transition, it was just like, oh, wait a minute, I'm just wondering if that's going to be a requirement for this RFP round as well.
So I can't speak to that. I'm just going to go off of what I've seen in the RFP, which has not mentioned a specific budget format like that. What I see in the budget section is that they want to see granular details that explain justification for why that thing matters and how you calculated that thing. If you have a template like that and you like working with it, or you want to get ahead of things, no, you don't like it, but you could definitely use it. But I'd say there's nothing here that's telling me that they are asking for that format. You know, another tip is you can always go into a blank spreadsheet, and, you know, if you've played with AI at all, you could go in and practice like giving it prompts, and you could say, let's say, let's see here. Got it. Let me open a new one. Equals AI. Help me with a budget, an itemized budget with room for justification. We'll see how this does. I actually normally do this on the left-hand side, so I don't know if it can. Nope. Okay, so don't do that. But if you have, actually, I think it can pop up right. All right, forget this part, but you can use AI in your like Google spreadsheet and actually ask it to give you a budget example. And you could say, give me a 1-year budget that has categories such as personnel and that keeps indirect costs at 10%. Obviously, it's not going to itemize. It's not going to have the details of it. You're going to have to fill it in, but it could give you a format that you could then work with. All right, so we just talked about budget and budget narratives. Oh, the other thing I would say budget narrative wise is, again, this is a great place to just Google examples. So budget narrative example, the very first 2 things, let's click in Greater New Orleans Foundation. This is a budget narrative. It doesn't look necessarily perfect, but it looks pretty helpful. Like if you don't know what a budget narrative is, this is a place you could definitely start and build from. And then let's look at the second example. This is just a random budget narrative, again, that I found from the first few Google results. And this looks great too. Like this looks like something I could build from. So if you're not sure, if you're feeling like, oh, I don't know what it is, like look around, search for it, or ask someone else who's written some of these proposals. Like whoever it was, I think, maybe it was it you, Katie, at the beginning, who said, you know, people who are just like killer grant proposal writers? Reach out to them and say like, hey, do you have an old budget and budget proposal that you've written for another grant that I could look at? I'm learning and I'd love to learn from what you've done. Reach out to someone who maybe, you know, from the first round, who you met at a conference, and you could reach out to them and say very professionally, like, hey, I would love to learn from what you've done. Could you share this so that I could learn from it? I did some, just to, in case it still feels elusive, this is just, again, totally made up. but this is what I would interpret the instructions from the RFP for a budget to be, the level of granularity. So it's not a full budget, it's just some items from the personnel and operating costs, but I would put in exactly what the expense is. If I'm, hiring a subcontractor, I'd put in their name. I would make it clear on how many hours I think they're gonna work on this and why. I'm gonna talk about what they're gonna do. I'm gonna describe how I calculated these costs. I'm basically gonna outline these granular details that help the funder and the reader have confidence that you have a plan. And so we talked about this already, but again, you want the people reading your proposal to feel like, hey, if we give them our money, they're going to use it really well. And a budget is one of the great places for you to show them exactly how you're going to use that money and that it's going to be used well. And there is such a difference. You can tell when someone is padding something or doesn't actually know how they're going to spend that money and they're just kind of filling a placeholder. Obviously, as we talked about already, things may change. You may discover as you go that you need to, pivot some costs, or maybe it was $10,000 more than you thought or $5,000 less. That's fine. You can communicate really clearly with Valley Vision, as Alan said in the proposers conference, and you might need to do some modifications with them. But start now with a thoughtful proposal that shows that you have thought things through and you have a good game plan to start. So who are you going to work with? What are they going to do? Are they someone you already know? Do they do good work? Let that be part of that justification and detail so that someone reading this has a lot of confidence, like they know what they're talking about. They are a trustworthy organization who I can be confident will use my money well. And this is just an example. We talked about the outreach. Imagine you were going to send a note to one of those organizations. You could say, hey, we saw your great project. We were really interested in X, thought you did such a great job on Y. And we would love to learn from what you're doing. We're trying to build up our grant program. We're still newer at it, or we're trying to figure out how to approach X. Pre-development is something we're trying to figure out. Would you be willing to share some resources you've used or your proposal? We would be very confidential. We'd be super professional. You definitely want to make sure, I'll skip ahead a second, make sure if you're sending these outreach notes that you stay professional, that you are authentic. So be a person, don't just be like a robot who's reaching out and asking for things, and be reciprocal. So if you ask someone to help you, think about whether there is something that you could offer them in exchange too. But I thought it might be helpful to just kind of envision what we mean. We gave the example earlier of like reaching out to the board member to read a draft. Here's what you could send them. Like, obviously modify it to your needs, but you can tell them very specifically, here's the timeline we're working in. Here is the RFP. Here is the rubric that we've created. We'd love to get your input. Here's when we'll send it to you. And you can work ahead even right now. And so I'd actually say, like, as we continue in this class, think about those people who you're going to have give input and start jotting them down on your notebook, and then send messages like this in the next few days so that you get out ahead of, don't send it to them and say, here's my attached proposal. Can you please read it by tomorrow? You want to give them a heads up. You want to be really professional and conscientious and respectful of their time. And so do that pre-planning so that you're set up for success and a really unhurried and unstressful process. All right, so I think we've talked about all of these. This is just the summary of what we've covered. The one thing we haven't talked about is this last one, evaluate credibility. And this again goes back to that idea of funders want to fund organizations who will maximize their investment, who will do really good work. And so have an honest gut check. Is there anything that you need to explain or overcome? Are you a new organization? Maybe you don't have a whole track record of years of work. Maybe you've got funded before from Valley Vision and you didn't turn in your paperwork on time and they had to chase you for reporting every few months. These are things that you're going to need to overcome and explain. I don't know what the other things are, but generally people have reputations and they're known for the kind of work they do. They're known for the kind of people who work there. I'm sure that you all are lovely, but if there is anything that you need to overcome, think about it proactively and how you're going to overcome it in this proposal so that someone doesn't pick up yours and say, oh gosh, like this looks good, but like they are a pain to work with. That's not going to help your chances of funding. And so think about what you need to do. Maybe you need to tell them you have changed the way that you do your reporting. You've hired someone who's now in charge of reporting and you know it was painful in the past, but hey, it's so much better. Or you're a new organization, and Alan gave a great response in the proposers conference to this too. Maybe you don't have a track record of 10 years of experience, but your executive director came from an organization where they had that track record, and your CFO came from a past organization where they had that track record. Gather those stories and put together something that can be part of that appendix or those appendices that you submit, and build that overall story that helps connect any dots that need to be connected or overcome any places where there might be concerns about you, your proposal, your organization, and think about them really honestly. And if there's something that you're going to need to overcome, think about how you can overcome it so that that does not hurt your chances to be funded. All right. We've had a jam-packed hour and a half. We are going to take a break and we're going to combine it with an exercise. So we'll give everybody about 15 minutes. Take a break, go grab a cup of tea, then sit down with your notebook and write down one of these items for this exercise. So for your rubric, you could start building your own rubric and just get a head start. We started that together, build your own. You could work on your timeline. This would actually be a great one to think through, like work backwards, June 15th, what has to happen, start to map out your timeline. Or identify that team. Figure out who are the people who are going to give you input on the proposal. What are they going to give input on? When do you need to get that input from them? And make a plan for when you're going to contact them and how you're going to contact them following up to today. You could also just write down some of the key things that you've taken away so far that you want to make sure you remember, some key takeaways. But we're going to come back together. What did I just say? Did I say 15 minutes? I think so. So we're going to come back at 2:50 and we'll talk about some of those things that you've written down and taken away. But we've got the next. All right. Go ahead and turn your videos back on. And we will get started. So as you worked on your planning, hopefully you've either made some progress on your timeline or your reach out list, or just writing down some of the takeaways you have. Let's take a moment or two to share some of those together. Michelle, anything in particular that you worked on during that time or are taking away?
Yeah, for me, with GRID, we're part of a regional climate collaborative, and we're actually looking towards getting funding for next year. And so I was thinking of possibly including them into this grant proposal. And then I was working a little bit on the timeline and what that would look like to get a submission by June 15th.
Awesome. Kathy, how about you? What did you work on during that time, and anything you can share?
Sure. Earlier, we have sort of laid out a draft of what we propose to do, or what the college proposes to do, I should say. And so we began our draft. We started writing it now. We've been looking for gaps. Then we will ID potential new partners, track involvement of the current partners, what exactly who's going to do what. And have weekly check-ins as we move forward with the main partners. That's as far as I got.
Awesome. Yeah, that's great. Cheyenne, how about you? Maybe not back yet. Cindy?
Yeah, I was looking at identifying our team members. That's one thing for me. I've always kind of been off by myself writing the grants and maybe having people do one or two things. So I've really got to set myself up for a little better success this time. It's tough to bring people in newer to it. So I've often made that trade-off. Can they tell the story? Can they? So I've started kind of dividing up the things that they could start working on, and we'll work on assigning those pieces out that I could then incorporate back into the grant. So that's what I've been kind of thinking through.
Yeah, I love that. And I think that that's so great to stretch yourself to really use those other partners. And, you know, that can have secondary benefits also. It can make this proposal stronger, but it can also be something that helps you just have like ongoing, more impactful work. So whether you're thinking community partners outside of your organization or people on the team, if people are bought into it and feel like they're part of it, it's extremely motivating. It helps people kind of see the connection between the work they're doing, the people they're serving, and then like the funding and helping to get it. And so it can have this multiplication effect that actually shows up in other ways. So I love that you're stretching yourself, and hopefully that will pay some dividends for you. Edward, how about you?
I worked on the checklist, and then I also was messaging my partner in this. We're actually meeting with some partners tomorrow, so just kind of preparing some documents for that, which then will become our timeline.
Perfect.
and team identification.
Awesome. Did any questions come up for anyone while you were working on any of your planning exercises? I think we covered a lot as we went, but I did want to just check. Okay, one thing that I have clarification for you all on is I checked in with Valley Vision during the break on our jobs question that we circled around on a little bit. And I wanted to point out two things. So one is, we didn't talk about this, but in the RFP on page 4, there is that note on promising jobs. And so that has a 10-year timeline to sort of get to those salary ranges that people were talking about. And I know there was a concern on like, is that right now? Do we have that? That's a great place to focus too, is to the connection to the longer term horizon of getting to those jobs in the 10-year time frame. So that was one thing. And then secondly is that pathways to existing jobs within the identified sectors are eligible. And this is going to be clarified in the Q&A by Valley Vision. So you should see that there. But hopefully that feels like good news to those of you who are kind of wrestling with that. I'd say still try to make your connection very clear as to how you're helping to generate those jobs, but it does not have to just be only creation. So we talked about that earlier. Hopefully that clarifies, and keep an eye out on the Q&A because it will be clarified there as well. All right. I feel like we're still missing one or two, but let's go ahead and keep going. Did our break. So this is a little sort of a middle of the class module. We're going to keep it short and sweet, but I did want to hit on a final part of thorough preparation before we go on to storytelling. Prepare thoroughly for this RFP, but also you should be thinking about other avenues of funding in case this one doesn't happen, or how you're going to start to cover your implementation funding once you have spent your money for all this pre-development work and you're ready to roll that out. And so this could honestly be a whole workshop in itself, and we're just not going to be able to get into tons of depth. But I did want to give you some guidance, especially to those of you who are newer to fund development, as you think about having just a regular practice of finding grant opportunities and submitting applications regularly. So as this slide shows, there's a number of different sources of funding, from government grants to private foundations to big corporations to individual donors. And I have 3 tips for you today as you think about building your grant program at. So number one, put that detective hat back on. The research that we talked about earlier, you're going to do even more of that as you look for opportunities. Spend time, dedicate time regularly, and follow the leads, follow the rabbit hole. See what interesting opportunities you can turn up by looking on websites, by looking on other projects that have been funded for other things. What can you learn about funding organizations? Just really let yourself kind of follow the trail and see what you can find. Secondly, as you do all that research, make sure that you keep track of it. So a month from now, Sarah will probably not remember what today Sarah did and thought. And so take notes, write down things that you're taking away, deadlines that might be coming up. Maybe you go and look at an organization and it seems like such a great fit, but they don't have any open calls for proposals or RFPs right now. Well, check back and make sure you write down when you should check back, or reach out and send one of those professional emails to ask them about when they might have funding coming up and available again. And then finally, I guess that is my final one, is that reach out. So build that network, have people who know about you, who you can get help from, or who might tell you about funding that they become aware of. So this is definitely a very small starter list, not at all exhaustive, but here are 6 organizations to get you started. Let's just go ahead and look at a few of these. So Sacramento Region Community Foundation. If I were spending my time right now doing my deep dive, I would land here and I would say, okay, so there's this nonprofit section and see opportunities. I'm going to click that. It's loading and I'm going to just scroll around and see what I find. Now, there's lots of things here that would be very probably good information gathering for me, but I keep going. And at the very bottom, I find this funding and grants registry. And there looks to be quite a number of proposal opportunities that I might have here. Some have already passed, but some are very much current, and maybe some of them match with things that I'm doing. So if some of them look interesting, I'd say click in and learn more about that opportunity. All right, loading, loading, loading. This is the YOLO Air Quality Education Grant, which might work very well with some of the things we're talking about in terms of our locations and focus on carbon neutral. And yeah, this looks great. So maybe, oh, so this actually says it's currently closed and was last year. So they don't have that updated currently. Bummer, but I might still scroll through and read. I see that there's a contact here. Maybe I can reach out to her and ask her, hey, like, it looks like there might be other opportunities. Is there going to be another one for this organization? All right, we'll do one more together. The California Wellness Foundation. So this one has a nice red banner, apply for a grant. Let's go check that out. So first thing I see is that this window is just about to close April 30th. So if I didn't already do my preparation, I'm probably not going to hit it. But there's another window coming open July 1 through 31, which is not that far away. So I'm going to note that down in my little booklet, and I'm going to see which things are open and which might align with things that I'm working on. And then I'm going to see that they have a letter of interest that they ask people to fill out. So this is something that has a downloadable Word version. And so I'm going to definitely click in here to see that. And this is the full outline of what their online portal is going to ask for. And so this gives me the chance to start thinking, all right, what are they looking for? What would I have to do? I can skim through it quickly, figure out, does this seem like a fit? If it is a fit, then I can start getting ready for this and pace myself so that I'm ready for that July 1 window and I could submit this letter of request. And you're going to want to think about, okay, what kind of funding do they give? How could I find that out if I don't know? Like put on that detective hat, figure out the things you need to figure out. I've worked on proposals before where like you think it's a certain high number, and then when you finally contact them, they're like, well, actually, we're just giving very small grants to a lot of organizations. And it's like, well, maybe I wouldn't have put in all that work if I knew that up front. And so think that second order thinking of how can you be the sleuth, be the detective, figure out what you want to be doing in order to research all of these, reach out to some of those grant makers. And then this is just for illustration. This might be what your tracker looks like. Funder name, you keep track of like, what is the contact information? What is the URL? You keep track of application deadlines, and then you keep track of notes. And probably if this were me, my notes would be even more extensive because I would want to just like write all those things down that would jar the memory of Sarah a month from now, who hasn't been working on this same thing every single minute. But just give yourself a chance to have a place that you keep and categorize all this information. And sometimes the very best list is the list of organizations that aren't accepting funding right now, but you've found them, you've discovered what types of things they like to fund. And all of a sudden you've got a list that every week or every month you go back and double check, and you start to have just a rhythm where you're going to understand their cycles, you're going to see it, and you can always reach out to them as well to find out more information.
Hey, Sarah, could you go back to your previous slide that just showed some of the before that?
These ones?
Yes, that's
Oh,
awesome.
yeah. Okay. I
Yep,
just wanted
yep.
to
So this is just like a quick little snapshot.
Yeah,
Hiker
gotcha.
is one I always used to write for when I did grant proposal writing. Some of these, you want to double check, like, do they only fund things in their county? Am I applicable if I'm outside of it? Double check all of those things. California Grants Portal, that one is just like a giant database of lots of different proposals. When are the deadlines? It links off to them. So there's like, it's kind of everything in the kitchen sink thrown in, but there's some really interesting proposals in there and opportunities. And so take a look, check it out, definitely look at these. And let these then help you find more. And all of a sudden you'll have a list that you're looking at that's, 50, 60, 70 organizations. Look at the tech companies, look at Google, look at Intuit, look at Meta. And I looked at them in preparation for this class, and none of them had an obvious one right now, but those things pop up. We're all in California. They're in California. Reach out to their fund development teams. Like, you can start to imagine that you can become a real networker who has a real pulse on funding opportunities, both big and small, in your area, just by keeping a simple spreadsheet and doing some regular research.
So I'm glad this is in here. So thank you for going through this material. One question that might be off the beaten path, and you can say we don't have time to address it, but your thoughts on just the general environment and tone on grants and their longevity or counting on
I
grant
think
funding?
these things go in cycles, and obviously, like, especially at like the federal level and maybe at the state level right now, we're going to see like a shift in the tone. I don't know, but I'd say like be ready for that. Think about that really carefully. It might become more scarce or hard to find certain opportunities, but there will still be opportunities. And there will always be places where you can find funding. It might become more competitive. It might change, kind of the focus areas also change. Like sometimes everybody's trying to give money to X initiative, and then a year later it's Y initiative. And so these things will always be changing, but I would say just kind of, that's why you do the regular research and look around and try to see where you can get ahead of those things. So it might become a tighter climate, but I don't think it's going to go away. Like, I think that this will continue to be a regular way to get funding. And then the other thing I would say related to that is it's actually, I think, quite rare to have a pre-development opportunity like the one that you're all working on for Valley Vision. So many proposals want something that's like ready to go tomorrow, and you have to kind of cobble together the pre-development for the application. And so this is a rare and great opportunity to actually do some of that pre-development work with grant funding that will then hopefully set you up really, really well for a really strong story when you get to the implementation phase of your project. Does that help, Cindy? I know it's not,
Yeah.
I don't have a crystal ball, but I'd say like, that's why you got to brush up those detective skills, because you want to be really good at finding what is there.
Okay, yeah, thanks for taking the time to answer that. That was very helpful.
All right, so we've given some examples of reach out notes earlier in the class. Here is another one. Imagine that you are reaching out to a funder and you want to ask them, like, is there anything coming up where you might be giving out funding or doing an RFP? This is an email that you could send after you customize it and modify it to ask them about those funding windows. And as you can see, you're showing up as a professional, you're being a real person, you are doing your research, and you're making sure that you ask smart questions. So don't tell them how much you love their community focused work if they really fund education. You know, think ahead, do that work. Don't ask them, do you have anything coming up that's open, when last week they announced their new RFP. Like, think ahead, look around, make sure that you're coming to the table having already done your research, but definitely reach out and build that network. Okay, we just talked about all that. We are going to go ahead and move on to storytelling, but before that, just any last quick questions on that? I know it was just sort of like a high level teaser, but I hope that gives you a few tools and reminders as you're building your overall grant program. All right. So the final section of today and the tee up to our in-person classes, which I hope you'll all join for at the end of May and early June, the storytelling piece of this. So you've done your preparation, you really understand the assignment, you've built a strong plan, and now you need to build that story that resonates with your readers. So what do you all think makes up good storytelling? What are some ingredients for a good story? Lovedeep? All right, Michelle, check in on our folks without their videos on.
That's great. I think for a strong story, usually involving like testimonials, we've used that strategy before, and also including a lot of data and some real life like impact is usually helpful.
Yeah, those are great. Awesome list. What else? Laura, anything else you can think of?
In writing, I think like I wouldn't say like a call to arms, but a call to a cause, like putting passion behind what you're saying and making the reader feel it.
Yeah, for sure. You want to stir up emotion in that reader. You want them to feel the need and desire to help you, for sure. Anything else?
Well, the strength in your organization, or the ability of your organization to carry out what you said you would. Experience. What has your experience been? And just build up the fact that you're the right organization to do this work.
Yeah. I think, Kathy, that ties in so well to what we were talking about earlier of like funders want to maximize their ROI. But it also reminds us that the people reading your document don't know everything about you. They don't know your organization. They don't know all your work. And so you have to tell them at the right level of detail for them to be able to take away what you want them to take away. And your storytelling is going to have to like strike that right balance. All right, so you have listed a lot of the ones that we were going to talk about and are going to talk about. The compelling case for change, which is really the from to of what your project is going to help drive. Focus on the customer, not yourselves. We'll talk more about that. Strong data, that one was mentioned by Michelle. And then make sure that you're leveraging all your research. So you did all that work up front to really understand what the organization wants from you, make sure you now bring it in and you use some of the same words or framing that they clearly already like. And finally, a good storytelling is grounded in really deep empathy for the readers of your proposal. So let's briefly touch on each of these. We'll start with focus on the customer. Intuit, which is where I've worked for the last 8 years, is really famous for their design thinking and something called Follow Me Homes. Has anyone heard of that before? No. Okay. So that is where the product team members go to a person's home or workplace and silently watch them do whatever it is that they're going to do in order to learn about their problems and needs. So maybe they're doing their taxes. Someone from TurboTax might go and just watch them do their taxes. Maybe they're running payroll or balancing their books with QuickBooks or not with QuickBooks. Maybe they're using paper and pen, maybe using some other competitor. This is not something that takes place in the Intuit offices. It is not an interview. It's a chance to just observe someone in their own environment doing whatever the task is and getting to see where do they run into friction, where do things go smoothly, what evokes emotion or frustration from them. And this is one of the key inputs into the product design and development process and helps the product teams ensure that they are solving for actual customer needs. Now, they also do interviews and they do tests with customers. It's not just one input, but the Follow Me Home helps create much better products than if people were solutioning away in the offices or off of general knowledge about their customers, but not interacting with them in their actual environments. So similarly, and some of you mentioned this already today, projects are going to be tremendously more successful if you are focused on the people that you are serving from the start and in partnership with those people in your project development, which you saw asked for in the RFP. So if you're going to go and do something to help these disinvested communities, whatever yours is, who are you working with from those communities? Who's going to give you input? How are you getting the data you're getting? Like the fact book was great. I hope you're pulling some data from it, but you should also be getting some firsthand data and stories. And, Michelle, I think you mentioned testimonials. Someone mentioned testimonials.
Yeah.
Those are awesome for bringing things to life and helping to explain that from to that you're going for. You want to make sure that you're centering the customer and showing the reader that you can co-create good solutions with the people that your project will help that ties to their goals. And so in this case, it's working with those disinvested communities, driving job opportunities, and having the people that you're wanting to really help be center to that, not your program, not you or your organization. The compelling case for change. So this is that from to of going from here's where we are today to after we do this program or this pre-development project, here's where we'll be and how we will be set up. This ties in very closely with the previous one. If you're talking about people, your customer, you should be making sure that you're tying your case for change very closely to them and also explaining exactly what your approach will be and what changes that work will create. So are you going to help 50 people be ready for jobs in these opportunity sectors? Are you going to help create 25 jobs in, whatever the category is? Be really clear so that it feels tangible and someone could say, oh, yeah, that project. Well, if they do what they said they're going to do, then at the end, this is what will have happened. And again, this is almost a little bit of a teaser. We will talk more about this and practice some of this in the storytelling workshop, but hopefully this gives you a place to really focus as you're drafting. Data and outcomes, we talked about this. You want to make sure you're quantifying things, and this goes hand in hand with the previous that we talked about. So when you give a data point, then maybe add some color to go with it from your community. So maybe your unemployment rate is really not great, but you give that stat and then you can bring it home to say, at a recent community, event where we were talking about this, 5 of our local unemployed members from our community shared that their key challenges are X, Y, and Z. We followed up with them and realized that we could partner on 2 of them in particular, and those are the 2 that our pre-development project are focusing on. I'm making it up, but you can see that you can pair this objective fact of here is the unemployment rate in our county with something that brings in the color, and the pairing of those 2 helps to create a really, really strong story. One without the other is kind of like, you know, missing a piece to the puzzle. So you really want to have those go hand in hand. So look to your organization, your records, look to the RFP like we talked about earlier and the grant makers website. We looked at the data book, we looked at that executive summary and the regional plan, get participant feedback. There's lots of articles that can have really great data points. Think about what are those sources where you can find data that helps make your case stronger. And one tip is if you don't have that data on hand, put it in still and just like, you know, make it bold, make it red, whatever you need to do to make sure you go back and do fill it in. Do not leave it unfilled in, but write as though you have it, because you will write a stronger proposal if you kind of imagine, okay, this is where that data point is going to go. And then on your plan, make sure that you're figuring out how to get that data point. But when I'm writing a document, you know, at some point it's just like a pile of big red like placeholders where I know I need to fill that in, but I was able to go ahead and write a strong draft because I didn't have to chase everything down to do it, and I didn't leave it out. I said, okay, X or Y for now, and then I went back later and made sure that I had that data. So leverage your research. We've talked about this a few times today. But those key terms that were mentioned, the way the RFP frames something, all of those are great ways for you to make your storytelling hit home. Don't use them sloppily. So don't just stick them in because you want to have the right buzzwords. That will be obvious and people will not love reading your proposal. So make sure that you're using them strategically and appropriately, but that's a great way for you to save time and to make sure you're just like very explicitly connecting the dots. And then tied to that, re-review everything. So maybe you did this big push today or the next few days to do all that research and preparation. Come June 10th, sit back down with all those materials, sit back down with that rubric that you created. Double check your notes. Maybe you find some places where you can beef something up or bolster it by pulling something back in, or remember like, oh yeah, that was something that I needed to go back to. And I loved that example from the website. And so now I can make sure that I really hit it home. So make sure you go back to not miss something that you thought you were going to cover and then didn't. All right. And the final ingredient for good storytelling is to build empathy for your readers. So what does this mean? Someone take a stab. Kathy? Oh, you're on mute.
There we go. There we go. Sort of bring them to where you are, you know, paint a picture of what, you know, what is currently happening and what could be possible.
Okay, so for sure, you want to make sure you tell them that story. But if you think of having empathy for them, so all of a sudden, let's try putting ourselves in their shoes. Edward, what were you going to say?
Yeah, don't make it hard on them. Like some of us like to use verbose language, and you know, it doesn't take all that. We want to make our point, right? But we want to do it in a way like they're reading hundreds of applications, and in this case, there's a lot of money. So reading, you know, writing in a way that simplifies it for them so that they're able to access the information they need to make sure that it's critically there, but it's not overwhelming. I get overwhelmed sometimes, so just don't overwhelm.
Totally. Like we all get overwhelmed and we all have big to-do lists in addition to whatever our to-do list we're doing right now is. So great points. Like, how do you have that sympathy for someone who's got that pile of RFPs and it's like, oh, I've got to get through all of these. And, you know, I'm going to be up here all night and my kid is coming out and needing another bedtime hug. And these are people who are going to do, I'm sure, a very professional, wonderful job reading your RFP, but they are people who are busy, who are stressed, who are going to get interrupted. And so think about how you can really put yourself in their shoes. What would you want if you were the one reading these RFPs? How else can we think about having empathy for our readers?
Make
I would say
clear
bullet-
connections. Oh,
Make
sorry.
clear connections. Good one, Kathy. What were you going to say, Laura?
Like bullet points. In some cases, we can label bullet points instead of making it a huge paragraph.
Yeah, and I think that ties in really well with this idea of simplifying language and cutting excess. So, my boss, who is a senior vice president at Intuit, I've worked for him for the last almost 8 years, and we've worked together on a lot of different documents, a lot of product documents, strategy documents. And he is someone who never pretended to understand something when he didn't understand it. So even if everybody else in the room was nodding along, if he didn't understand, he would pause a meeting and he would ask to understand it. And he would often say, hey, can you just explain it to me like you would to a 5th grader? And what he means by that is make it simple and understandable. Don't assume knowledge that people might not have. So don't assume that someone has the Calusa stats at their fingertips or knows exactly how XYZ works in Sacramento or, whatever it is. Tell them, make it easy for them to understand. Make yourself credible too. So if you're going to spout data, make sure you share where the source is. Like, don't throw out data points that are just like on an island. Give them the data where they could go look it up if they wanted to. So that's a great one. And you don't need to include information that isn't necessary. Sometimes we get so excited about our project or something that we're writing and we just put all of this stuff in and it's just not needed. And so you have to be able to like pull that out. This is my baby bear details. So this is the story of Goldilocks where it's like too hot, it's too cold, it's just right. Don't be too hot, don't be too cold. You've got to figure out what's that just right amount so that you do tell your story and it brings it to life, but you don't overload people with information that they just don't need to be able to read your proposal and give it a scoring. And then lastly, revise. I think earlier I missed saying it on the slide and we'll remind ourselves again of this in a minute, but your typos matter. Your grammar, it matters. It is very disappointing to read a proposal and discover typos in grammar. And even if it doesn't really matter, it does matter because it chips away at your credibility as an organization that does careful, thorough work. And so don't give those little opportunities to chip away your credibility for the reader. Make sure you check. And double check and triple check and have someone on your team who's going to be a great typo catcher and grammar, double checker and make sure that they give a read to that proposal as well. So that you do not submit something that is just like showing silly or sloppy mistakes. All right. And that brings us to our second exercise on storytelling. On this one, I've given you 3 options. You can write down your problem statement. You can talk about some of your solutions. So maybe using the bullet idea, try just like jotting down what are the pre-development items that you're going to do to address that. You could write down some of your expected outcomes, or you could just go back to this as what we talked about and think about, okay, what are the things I'm taking away from this that I know I'm going to specifically need to apply. So maybe you kind of zero in on your own weaknesses or places you might need help. And you say, okay, that's something that I'm going to make sure in this process that I really give myself like 3 days to explain it like a 5th grader, or I'm going to give myself an extra buffer of a week for that review. Or I think that I know so-and-so is going to be really good at helping me get to the point, and I'm going to ask them if they would just meet me to have coffee and help me cut that excess. So it's a few minutes for you to internalize what you've learned. I think we'll actually do this as 5 minutes. So 3:30, and then the second 5 minutes we will use to debrief. Kathy?
Did you mean to put up a slide for us to look at?
No, just this. Oh, can you
Oh,
not see my
okay.
screen? You can.
No.
I can see it.
I can.
Okay,
Yeah.
must just be me.
Okay.
Me. Sorry.
Okay, it just says storytelling exercise. And see if maybe it's somewhere else on your screen, Kathy. See if you can zip around. Otherwise, message Chester. All
Thank
right,
you.
so we've got 5 minutes till 3:30. All right, let's come back together. What are your takeaways? And it's also fine to ask any questions that might have come up as you were working on that. Go ahead and pop back on video if you can. All right, Katie, what were your takeaways?
I was trying to work on expected outcomes from a proposal idea that we're working on. So I got 2. I still need to come up with a third one.
Yeah, well, 2 in 5 minutes. That sounds good. Laura?
Okay, I'm not the one writing. Debbie is the one writing.
Debbie?
And she focused on the problem statement. So she said the community that she's in is rural and disinvested area that is lacking jobs and skills training. Many of the people are facing poverty conditions, and then we were going on to solutions.
I love that. So I think that's a great tee up. I would say in that, how can you get really specific on some of the things that are unique to you? Because probably a lot of the people in this room could say that same thing.
Yeah.
Now, how can you make yours come to life and illustrate what that means? So is it that story about a person? Is it what thing all of a sudden takes it from generic to specific?
Personal. Yeah.
Love Deep, how about you?
Yeah, so I was mostly thinking about the solution approach and expected outcomes. I'm also not going to be the one writing a grant. I'm like helping other organizations through the process. And I was just kind of thinking about some organizations that applied this last round and some of the ideas they had and how to really specify, right? Those having 3 very specific things that they can talk about to kind of make it more direct and to the point. So I was kind of just brainstorming on that on a few different
Yeah.
proposals that I saw last round.
That's great. One other thing that we talked about a little bit earlier when we talked about partnerships, but I think that that's a place where your storytelling can like be bolstered so much when you have a really strong partnership with others in your area and you can bring that to life. It adds credibility to the plan. It can add more readers and helpers to build things out and work on that proposal. But again, putting yourself in the shoes of your reader, having that empathy, when you see a proposal that has the contributions of multiple organizations in a community who are working together to do something, that will probably give you more confidence. You might think to yourself like, okay, I think this has a real chance. Like people are coming together. When you see someone who's just working on their own completely and they're kind of isolated, then you might not have that same confidence. So I think that's a great one to think about and look for how can you connect dots even between other organizations. Some of you together, some of you might know each other already, some of you may not, but there might be opportunity coming out of these workshops for more collaboration also. Any questions that came up or have come up as we've talked about storytelling? We talked about the explain it as a 5th grader, another framing for that could be like explain it to a partner. So maybe your partner is someone who doesn't work at your organization or know all the inside like language that you have. Try to explain your plan to them, maybe have them read part of it and see like, is this clear? Does this make sense? Where can we be more clear and strong? Lovely, if you have a question.
I do have a quick question. I guess when
with the storytelling portion, how do we kind of help make sure it doesn't become so long-winded? And it's, we're talking in this big old circle about this really abstract idea. I guess so, like, if you have any tips or like pointers to keep that conciseness. I know you said like explain it to a fifth grader, but then with that also, that's like you don't want to over explain, and then your whole storytelling, like your problem statement is what now, like a whole page long. So I guess, are there like key things that should always be hit in the problem statement, and then other things that if you can fit it, you can fit it, otherwise it's okay to omit?
Yeah, so I'd say my biggest tips are, one, put yourself just in the reader's shoes completely. So what would you need to understand and answer that question? And if that becomes difficult because you're so close to it, that's where you pull in the person next to you or the other reader, and you draft, and then you say, like, can you read this? What do you think? Where could we cut back? What can we cut down? Where is it too long-winded? So those are your like surround tools to make sure that you're staying focused. In terms of the writing it itself, it depends, but I tend to be someone who writes long first, and then I shorten down, and that works well for me, but I let myself get it all out, and I get all the details down. I have my placeholders, and it's always too long. And so I then have to go back through and cut, and tighten. And sometimes that's tightening sentences to say, like, oh, that doesn't have to be 18 words. That one can be 8, and I can condense that. Sometimes it's taking out whole parts. Sometimes it's getting rid of parts that I love. Like maybe it was that great quote and it was so good, but I have that covered already, or I have that coming in somewhere else, or I can put that in another place. And so you have to be willing and ready to like get rid of those things, which is why I also talked about in your timeline, give yourself some space where you can step away and come back, because it's really hard when you see it hour after hour to take that objective view. But if you take a weekend or 4 days or something, and then you come back, often that can be a good moment. And then the other thing I would say, yeah, so I'd say AI can be great too. Katie mentioned that. You want to be very careful here that you're not letting AI take over, because it will become messy or very obvious that it was used. But I have used this as well. I actually just wrote a very long document for a class I'm taking, and it was like 4 pages too many. And I took it page by page and I pasted it. In my case, I was using Gemini and Google Docs, and I asked it to retain all content and meaning, but shorten by 200 words. And I would go page by page, and then I would check it. And sometimes it would take things out that I was like, you know what? I can't lose that. I need that. I'm pulling that back in. But often it would just tighten the language or simplify something that was super helpful. And I could use that, and then, saved myself all that time doing some of that work. The last thing I would say is read it out loud. So pull it up and read it out loud to yourself, or read it out loud to your partner or someone else on your team. That can be a really effective way to sort of hear what it sounds like and realize, like, okay, I already said that a minute ago, or I don't need that. All right, any other questions? Okay, we talked about this a minute ago. I think we hit it home pretty well, but your grammar and your typos, they matter. So proofread carefully. 4 things that I see as common proposal pitfalls, and I think we've touched on these to some degree throughout the day, but when you miss those key requirements from the RFP, it's just like, not good for you. Your score will go down, and it adds to that credibility issue where it's like, why are they an organization that can follow directions? Are they going to give us our reporting? And so make sure that you fill out what is asked of you. We talked about this too, the jargon overload. So don't use too many technical or buzzwordy words and language. And it can be easy to kind of swing the pendulum to the wrong way, because you've done all this great research and there's so many great words and framings that other people are using in this website or on the RFP. Use them, but don't overuse them. The weak outcomes is something that can be a real problem. Like, even if it sounds like your plans are good, but you're not clearly connecting them to what that will drive, that will hurt your chances, because it will make it hard for the readers to really see, like, is this actually going to amount to something that has impact and has potential. And then finally, having a last minute rush that can show up in all of these other ways. You're missing requirements, you've got the jargon, the weak outcomes, but you won't have enough time to polish it and to catch all the last little things that take something from it okay or good proposal to a great proposal. Finally, your final checklist, make sure, again, we've said it probably 20 times today, but this is like, they have given you the scoring. They have told you what exactly they want. So make sure that you have addressed all of those elements of your RFP in your answers. Proofread, double check the writing, make sure you don't have those typos, make sure that your grammar is clear. And then let's just put a number to it. Make sure you get at least 3 sets of fresh eyes on your proposal. I'd say probably, maybe more depending on who is giving input to different places, but make sure that you have other people read and give them that rubric so that they can actually know, what am I reading for, and check you against, ask them to score you. Say like, this one's out of 8. Can you give me a score out of 8? This one's out of 6. Give me a score out of 6. See exactly how you stack up from those fresh eyes, and then try to get this in early. I'm sure we've all been in that place where we're last minute trying to do things, and that is always when like your internet conks out, or all of a sudden you have a software update that you have to do, or something terrible happens. Literally this morning, the internet in our home just went out, and I was like, what is happening? I was frantically reaching out to my husband. I was like, I have to teach this class today. And it like just always happens in those moments when you don't want it to. So save yourself the stress. And if you have that careful, thoughtful plan, you will not have to be frantic and last minute. So try for the early submission. And with that, any last questions that have come up for you as we have gone through anything from today? So not just the storytelling, but it could have been earlier.
Can you remind me, when, or Valley Vision, when is the Q&A document going to be updated with a little more clarification on the, what was it, pathway to an existing job question?
I think they said they are trying to do that today or tomorrow, so pretty quickly.
Okay. Okay.
Any other questions? All right. So for your next steps, do your planning, send your emails, get your team in order, get started on your draft. Try to get to a very strong draft before the in-person workshops if you're planning to come to those. I hope you will attend one of the in-person storytelling workshops. And Chester, do you mind dropping the registration, which just came out, in the chat? There is one on May 29 in Sacramento or June 2 in Colusa, and the registration is now open. So I think that's now in, or coming soon in the chat, and you can go ahead and register.
I had a quick question.
Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, I do see the in-persons are like towards the end of May and June. And I know the virtual grant writing workshop is supposed to be in conjunction to the in-person. I guess so if anyone isn't able to attend today and like tomorrow, or the ones this week virtually, are there any tools or like documents or information that we can give them to supplement so that they're able to attend the later workshops and still get all of that information?
Yeah, so this is recorded, and tomorrow's will be also, and they will be posted on the Valley Vision website.
Okay, cool.
So, and a little nifty trick, if you are watching it later, is that little speed thing. You can change it to 1.5x, so you can do the speed version. And, just even if you were here, take a walk and refresh yourself. But yeah, they'll be available. And so you'll be able to use that. And I think we'll have the slides. I mean, there was obviously a lot in between the slides, but the full recordings will be posted on the website. And if someone did not attend, we do want them to watch the recording before the in-person workshop. So make sure that they do.
Okay, cool.
And it looks like Chester has the interest form linked to for the in-person workshops. Those ones will, we kind of have space constraints. And so we'll keep a waiting list if the interest is too big, and then let you know if you get off it, but hopefully you can sign up quickly and get in. All right, and then another
It's-
link coming from Chester. Yeah, go ahead, Kathy.
Is this sign up in addition to the sign up we did earlier?
It is in addition. So the
Okay,
sign up you did
thank you.
earlier was for this. And the sign up that Chester just posted is for the in-person workshops. And yes, I am facilitating at the in-person workshops too. So maybe I'll get to meet some of you in person. And the other link that Chester just posted is right now is the feedback survey, which would be wonderful if you could take a few minutes now while we're still here to just go fill that out. I would be very grateful for your feedback and input, and we'll take your feedback and keep it in mind.
Oh,
All right, any last questions from anyone? Okay, well, it was lovely to spend the afternoon with all of you. Good luck as you strategize, prepare, read, and reread, pull in your partners, make your game plans, and start drafting. And I hope that I will see you maybe at one of the in-person workshops at the end of May or in early June. But thank you very much for coming and for your great participation and involvement today.
thank you.
All right, have a good evening.
Thank you. Have a good week.
Thank you.